The world is filled with both beauty and darkness. We all wish to live in peace, free from harm. Yet there are some who bring violence and pain, disrupting the tranquility many desire. Victims have their lives cut short in moments of terror, leaving behind grieving loved ones questioning why such evil exists. Hi guys, and welcome back to Crimeco, where we break down some of the most gruesome true crime cases from all over the world, giving you the most up-to-date detailed information. If that sounds like something you are interested in, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to give this video a like. A like from you really helps the channel. Thank you. Now let's dive in. Nestled on the southeastern outskirts of Russia's capital Moscow lies the community of Bitsa Park. Row upon row of drab Soviet-era apartment buildings stretch to the horizon, housing over 15,000 residents seeking affordable city living. Parks and shops dot the otherwise concrete landscape, hints of green amongst the gray. Parents push strollers along sidewalks, while elderly folks meander home with bags of produce and bread. To an outsider, Bitsa Park appears no different than thousands of other neighborhoods in Moscow, unremarkable and unassuming. But in the shadows, a predator was awakening who would shatter this facade of normality. Alexander Yuryevich Pikushkin was born on April 9, 1974 in Mytishchi, just outside Moscow. His parents were Natalia and Yuri Pikushkin, ordinary working-class folks. Alexander grew up with his mother and younger half-sister in a humble fifth-floor apartment at 2 Kersenskaya Street within Bitsa Park. His next-door neighbor and best friend was Evgeny Moveldyanov. By all accounts, Alexander was a friendly and sociable young boy, eagerly playing with other children. But soon a tragic accident would set forth a chain of events that transformed innocent Alexander into a budding serial killer. When Alexander was just 4 years old, he suffered a severe head injury after falling off playground equipment, striking his head on the hard ground below. Doctors worried the frontal cortex of Alexander's brain may have been damaged during the fall. This region of the brain controls important functions like emotions, impulses, and judgment. The resulting trauma could have impaired the development of these faculties in young Alexander. Soon after the accident, major behavioral changes became evident. The once affable boy grew increasingly volatile and hostile. Concerned, his parents transferred Alexander to a school for children with special needs. But rather than thriving, he was severely bullied for his learning disabilities. Classmates taunted him with cruel names like retard. This rejection only amplified the growing rage incubating within the troubled boy. Matters became worse when Alexander's father abandoned the family suddenly when Alexander was just 4, leaving him without a vital male role model during his vulnerable developmental years. The loss and feelings of rejection stoked his burgeoning resentment towards the world. As Alexander grew older, he became more and more withdrawn, sullen, and quick to anger. A once ordinary boy was sinking deeper into the shadows. But a small light still flickered, his beloved grandfather. Recognizing his grandson's keen intelligence despite his issues, Alexander's grandfather took him under his wing. Chess became an outlet for the ostracized boy. Alexander discovered an aptitude for the game, spending long hours playing chess in Bitsevsky Park. For a time, his brewing inner turmoil seemed to abate. But fate would deal another crushing blow. While Alexander was still a teenager, his grandfather, his sole friend and mentor, passed away unexpectedly. Already disconnected from peers and family, Alexander was utterly devastated by the loss. He turned to alcohol to numb his grief, drinking heavily in the park where he once played passionless games of chess. The drinking stoked something far more sinister, Alexander's emerging homicidal desires. He began collecting violent videos to watch obsessively, taking pleasure in seeing cruelty and suffering inflicted. The former boy, damaged by trauma and rejection, was gradually warped by darkness, and soon he would unleash that evil upon his community. By 1992, the still teenaged Alexander Pikushkin had cultivated a network of antisocial peers who fueled his sadistic tendencies. That summer, one of these troubled friends, 17-year-old Mikhail Adichuk, agreed to meet Alexander in Bitsevsky Park. When they met near the pond that July day, Alexander revealed his chilling plan to kill 64 people, one for each square on a chessboard. Adichuk immediately backed out, wanting no part in Alexander's demented vision. Furious at being rejected yet again, Alexander strangled Adichuk by the pond, leaving his lifeless body hidden in the sewer canals that intersected the park. When questioned by police 3 days later about his friend's disappearance, Alexander claimed no knowledge. With zero evidence, police could only release the stone-faced young man. One down, 63 victims to go, Alexander tallied the first sealed square in his deranged chess game. Alexander would not kill again for several years, but in the interim, his twisted fantasies swirled, fixating on how to continue his sadistic mission. The answer came in 1996 when Russia imposed a moratorium on the death penalty. Alexander realized he could now murder freely, without fear of being executed if caught. A suspended death penalty emboldened monsters like Alexander, freeing them of consequences for their atrocities. Soon the body count rose again in Bitsa Park at the hands of the fledgling killer. The formerly peaceful community park became a hunting ground littered with hidden horrors. Alexander launched into full serial killer mode in the early 2000s, selecting Bitsevsky Park as his personal killing field. He prowled the grounds for vulnerable prey, the elderly, homeless, addicted, anyone unlikely to be missed when gone. These were lives Alexander deemed worthless, expendable for his twisted desires. When he identified a victim, Alexander would approach them while they rested on benches or loitered in the secluded wooded areas. He'd ingratiate himself by offering free alcohol, knowing they'd rarely refuse. Only when he had them alone would the ruse end. Alexander would produce a hammer or broken vodka bottle concealed under his jacket to blind them without warning. Most died quickly under his powerful blows, but some still clung to life. These Alexander tossed into the sewer canals crisscrossing the park, sadistically watching them drown in the frigid water. To fulfill his obsession, Alexander marked each victim by jamming sticks, bottles, or debris into their shattered skulls. Police eventually discovered the bodies but had no suspects. Residents grew fearful as more turned up each year, but Alexander was careful, leaving no traces at the scenes. News reports referred to the unknown killer as the Bitsa Park maniac, sending further ripples of dread through the community. But the maniac walked free, lost in his homicidal compulsion. 45 victims met their end this way, Alexander meticulously tracking his mounting kills. But as his confidence grew, so did his recklessness. Soon the sewer murders would escalate to even greater brutality. After 4 years spent secretly depositing bodies in the sewers, Alexander was ready to increase both his victim count and their suffering. Starting in 2005, his modus operandi shifted from a single deadly hammer blow to repeated strikes with the weapon followed by mutilation. Alexander purposefully bludgeoned his victims until they were unrecognizable, crushing their faces and features into a pulpy mess. He took his time now, relishing their agony as they slowly succumbed to the trauma. To further degrade them, Alexander would impale his victims through their eyes with umbrella tips or sticks, marring once lively faces with these gruesome markers of his madness. No longer did he need the sewers to conceal evidence of his psychopathy. The open-air killings displayed Alexander's growing confidence that he would never face consequences. He left corpses splayed in public areas, taunting their discovery. One was brazenly displayed on a park bench, umbrella shoved through an empty eye socket. Each shocking killer scene fueled hysteria about the roaming monster who seemed unstoppable. But Alexander made small mistakes in his surge of arrogance. Police autopsies showed many victims suffered identical clustered injuries caused by a specific hammer-type weapon, and witnesses reported seeing a tall, powerfully built man with the victims right before their disappearances. An unofficial profile of the killer emerged, hinting he was a strong, organized local familiar with the area. Pressure mounted to end the nightmare-stalking Bitsa Park, but the body count rose higher, 15 more victims from 2005 to 2006. Alexander would not stop of his own volition. Only capture could halt his sadistic rampage. Marina Moskalyova became the 48th and final victim of Alexander's 14-year killing career. A 36-year-old supermarket clerk, Alexander knew Marina casually and did not expect suspicion from her. On the morning of June 14, 2006, he approached Marina near her apartment building within Bitsa Park. Alexander suggested they take a stroll through Bitsevsky Park together. Though uneasy, Marina agreed, fatally underestimating the predatory man beside her. In a secluded section of the park surrounded by trees, Alexander suddenly produced a hammer from his jacket and struck Marina repeatedly in the skull. Yet astonishingly, Alexander made a grave error. Earlier, before leaving home with him, Marina had penned a quick note for her young son. If she did not return by dinner, the note instructed her son was to call Alexander at the phone number provided. Alexander knew of the note, but shockingly did not anticipate it foiling his plan. When Marina did not come home that evening, her terrified son called Alexander as she had instructed. Alexander casually claimed no knowledge of Marina's whereabouts. Immediately suspicious, the panic-stricken boy called his father. The police were promptly contacted. When interrogated based on the son's testimony, Alexander's lies unraveled rapidly. Investigators searched Alexander's residence, discovering his macabre chessboard tracking victims. Video footage placed Alexander and Marina together just before she vanished. The blatant lies, damning physical evidence, and eyewitness testimonies cemented Alexander's guilt. He confessed fully, leading authorities to gather remains and evidence from Bitsevsky Park. In a tragic twist, Marina had unknowingly escaped death once before at Alexander's hands. Nearly 5 years earlier, in 2001, Alexander had brutally murdered Marina's friend Larissa near their adjacent apartment buildings. Marina had been unfazed by her neighbor's unsolved disappearance. Now she had fallen prey to the same killer. The conquest Alexander had reveled in for 14 years was at last checkmated. His campaign of terror against Bitsa Park in the name of warped desire had ended. He would finally be brought to justice amidst a shaken community's relief. Alexander Pikushkin was convicted on October 27, 2007 for the murders of 49 victims, 3 attempted murders, and over 40 additional homicides still unproven but suspected. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the first 15 years to be served in solitary confinement. Despite claiming he wished to kill 64 people to match the number of squares on a chessboard, Alexander's murderous ambitions were permanently halted after 48 known victims. What drives someone to become a remorseless killer? Inside Pikushkin's disturbed mind existed a perfect storm of factors that forged his abnormal psychology. The childhood head injury possibly damaged Pikushkin's frontal cortex, the brain region controlling emotions and impulses. Such trauma at a young age can severely impair development. Parental abandonment and rejection also deeply scared Pikushkin. His father left when Pikushkin was just a toddler, while classmates bullied him viciously for his learning disabilities. Feeling isolated and uncared for fueled his detachment from humanity. Above all, Pikushkin craved power after feeling helpless for so long. Murder became the ultimate expression of control. Deciding who lived or died made Pikushkin feel godlike, a twisted escape from his own insecurities and inadequacies. Killing randomly and brutally was his way of proving no one could hurt him anymore. Ultimately, Pikushkin showed the hallmarks of being a psychopath. He displayed no guilt, empathy, or regard for his victims' suffering. Human lives meant nothing except as pawns in his terrifying game. The murders fulfilled Pikushkin's sadistic desires and delusional sense of superiority. Though the chessboard killer will pay for his appalling crimes through lifelong incarceration, deeper lessons remain about the roots of violence. Troubled youths like Alexander, damaged and cast aside by society, need support before turning to the darkness. Improved mental health care, nurturing communities that embrace differences, guidance replacing ridicule. These can divert fragile minds from destructive paths. Punishment alone cannot undo decades of neglect or trauma. Alexander Pikushkin's story illustrates what happens when cruelty and rejection eclipses empathy and care. But there will always be far more who answer darkness with light, meeting inhumanity with compassion. May we each bring more of such radiance to the world through wisdom, patience, and understanding. For there, but for the grace of human kindness, go even monsters among men. This concludes our today's case on the devastating tragedy of Bitsa Park. From this darkest of horrors, may we walk in the light. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with the latest true crime cases. We appreciate having you as part of our community as we explore the mysteries that continue to fascinate us all. Stay curious and remember, justice may stay hidden in the darkest corner. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.